Hi there, this is Dr. Embody with Project 2. And this project incorporates two things that we've been studying. One is loops, that's out of Chapter 2, and then strings out of Chapter 3. And you need to be a little careful because this project is quite a bit more complex than Project 1, so plan your time accordingly. It's not that long a program. My while loop had 10 lines of code in it, not counting the blank spaces and the comments, but 10 actual lines of code. So it's a relatively short program, but you got to get the details right. And what I'm going to focus on today is the problem-solving aspect of this. How do I go about solving this problem? And one of the things you do is you decompose it into smaller problems, and that's what I'd like to focus on. So let me start by describing the problem itself. It's decompression. And decompression and compression is really important. You use it actually all the time in computing because your music is in MP3s and your videos are MP4s, and those are compression algorithms. And what we're doing here is we're going to look at the decompression part, not the compression part. Mostly because this is just a way to do an exercise in loops and strings. And the basic idea looks something like this. If I take a string, in this case it is this little ditty here, and I compress it, it comes out to be something like that, because we're taking advantage of the fact that there's this peas, porridge, peas, porridge, peas, porridge, and some like it, some like it, some like it. And our hot and our cold, these things are all repeated, so why waste the space? And what I do is we have these tuples, that's what's in between parentheses here, that represented the repeated parts. So for our program, the input is this and the output is that. So I'm going to give you a string and you're going to decompress it and give me that. Well, the focus here, in order to do this, I have to extract those numbers. So the very first thing to do is not even think about how this project works, but think about how do I extract these numbers. So that in this case, I would like to go through and locate those parentheses and print out the numbers involved. All right. If you could do that, you have the basic control down for this project. So that's why you want to think about decompose the problem into a smaller problem that's easier to solve. It's like, oh yeah, there's all this compression stuff going on now. Fine. Let me first extract the numbers. And how do I extract the numbers? Well, you extract the numbers because there's a specific pattern to them. There's a left parentheses, there's a right parentheses, there's a comma, and then in between are some digits. Now we simplify this just to make it a little easier for you and say there are only parentheses that are these tuples for the decompression, and every time there's a left paren, there's a right paren with a comma and digits in between. So we don't have to do any error checking or anything like that. If I find a left paren, then I know I have one of these tuples. And furthermore, I know that if I can't find a left paren, then I don't have any tuples left to find. And you can make use of this fact is there is a string method called find, and you can that's a left paren, not a C in there, and that will give you the index of a left parentheses. And if you can't find a left parentheses, it will give you the index -1. So you can use that now to control your loop. And so the very first thing to do is go through and find the parentheses. In fact, even simpler than this problem is I went through and I found the index of every left parentheses. That's all I did. Okay? I just found the index of the left parentheses. And then once I could do that, then I would also find the indices of the right parentheses, and then find the indices of the commas, And then after that, I would use what's called slicing of strings, Python slicing, to then extract the numbers and then convert those to ints. So that's the basic process here that we go through to find the numbers. And once I've found the numbers, then what I will do is think about the problem. How do I handle the repetition of something like peas porridge? Well, what this does is this says count back from this spot. All right, and actually this will be in the decompressed string. So you'll create a new string. I'll call it S, and you say, okay, so I don't up to the parentheses. Peas porridge hot. And now it says count back 20, boom, 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 20, which actually puts me right here. And then count forward 15, and I have peas porridge. Take that and copy that in here, peas porridge. And now when I've done that, I'll tell you right now that you want to have a variable, I called it pos for position, that keeps track of the end of this string that you're building up. And then now you can say, oh, until I get the next parentheses, there's cold, comma. Now we go again. This says 21:15. Remember, we've already figured out how to get those. I count back 21, which gets me to here. Count forward 15. There's another peas porridge. And I will take that and copy it in here. All right, update my my count here of my position, and then I can now say, all right, I got to add in these guys and go through the process again. Count back 48, and I will get the in the pot. All right, it's got, so oops, I forgot to copy the P in here, and then we go back and we're going to grab, the 4 characters, hot, and the space in there, and the comma, pot, comma, space. All right, so I'm going to copy those in here, and so on. And that's how the algorithm goes. But notice the first thing I do is get the numbers, and then I have to go and take this process of looking back into this string that I'm building. So you have a lot of stuff to keep track of, but it's all based on those numbers. All right, you'll see there's also backslashes in here. Those will indicate carriage returns. Leave that till the absolute end. Once the whole thing is working perfectly, you can then deal with those. Until then, just forget about it, because it turns out one line of Python will take care of that for you. And so forget about it till the end. Right. But that's your basic idea for this algorithm. So if you can, but you got to start with printing those numbers, and be very careful with building this, because if your index is off by just 1, it won't work. And so to give you an idea of what I mean by doing this by hand, I built this little jig here. So so here I called my output string outstring, and let's now see how this works. So the first thing I have to do is I use find, and I find that my index is at 14, and that I then have to carry the slice from the beginning up to but not including 14, and I will copy it into my output string. All right, once I have that copied in there, this says that I need to count back 14, that's back to here, and go forward 6. that's these guys, and copy it in right here. And so I just have a string. I can use string concatenation, which is just the plus sign. And as I mentioned before, I do need to keep track of the end here. So when I've copied those in there, I need to keep track of the end. Then I say, all right, up until my next parentheses, well, I only, that's the last one I have here. So at the end, I have to then copy over the last bit here. And now I'm done. All right. But you've got to be careful with how you're keeping track of these indices here, how you're adding things on there. So as I mentioned before, first thing to do is find these values in all the tests that we have, and then carefully go through and work out the indices here. And if you have a diagram like this to refer back to, and you have to give names to things. I called this guy left. I called that guy right. I called this guy comma. I had my my guy down here. I called that POS for position. You might want to call it I for index. So whatever your fancy is there. And then you have to give a name to this that I was replacing with. I called that replace. Right? And you've got to be careful. I'm doing slicing here, and you got to watch out for once in a while you'll need a -1 in there, or sometimes you'll need a +1. Remember, because slices go up to, but not including the end. You got to play around. You got to be comfortable with slicing, and I suggest that you play around with that. The first thing I did is after I found the 14 and the 16, I did the slice, and then I printed it out and make sure that I was grabbing the right thing, and then when I put it in, I printed out my output, check to see how that worked. So that gives you an idea of how to go about solving this problem. Good luck.